start this so we can have it for the VOD. Always nice. Awesome. Okay, so we are going to officially start. Again, welcome everyone to the show. This, I guess, arguably is somewhat week 5, but for the most part, we're really going to be talking today about jumping. We're going to talk. We're going to try and maybe start getting into more of the topical discussions and points surrounding Kingdom Builders and specifically Infinity Kingdom. And so, for those of you who have attended my first 4 shows that we did here on the official IK Discord, they were really talking about an introduction to Infinity Kingdom, right? What is it? What is the genre of Kingdom Builders? What are some nice features that separate Infinity Kingdom from other Kingdom Builders that make IK more of a standout in the genre? And then on week 2, we talked about kind of the beginning stages, right? You're just starting your account, right? What are you going to be experiencing kind of within the first week? And then week 3, we did day 30 to day 90, which kind of talked about month 2 and 3 on what you can experience when you join a new server. And then the last week we did was talking about more or less the late game, which is kind of 90 days plus. This is after migration opens in your server. And then we just talked a little bit about what you can experience during that time. So again, fast forwarding now to more or less, give or take, week 5, we're going to be talking about jumping, right? What is a jumper account? How do you go about jumping? Again, we may touch a little bit about jumping projects as well. But let me, if I can, just to start, because I like to do these throughout, I would love just to kind of get a raise of the hands, and we will also be taking questions. Just as a quick note, if you're a new member or if you're just a visitor, then please, again, you're more than welcome to ask your questions in the voice channel chat, just out of respect. Again, we're only going to be taking questions on voice here in the stage channel for current existing members that already have roles. Now, a quick show of hands. Who here has done a jumper account before, whether it's in IK or if it's in another game? If you've done a jumper account before, just curious on a raise of hands, how many of you have done a jumper account before? Doesn't matter if it's in IK or if it's even in another Kingdom Builder. Okay, so a few so far. Awesome. All right, let me dismiss that. Thank you. All right, so again, about a third of the people that are in here so far, right, have done a jumper account. Now, let me just explain briefly. Let me explain briefly what a jumper is, and then we're just going to dive a little bit into the history on why jumpers even got started in the first place. So a jumper account, in short, is a new account that you create in an ideal server or kingdom where you can gather and farm resources to essentially boost your account. So then you can load it with as much time investment, as many resources as possible. In some games, you can even jump. You can start out in one kingdom, you can farm resources in that kingdom, and then you can jump to a second kingdom or server, do the same thing, farm resources, and then eventually go to your third and final. In other games, you may only be able to jump once, where you start out in a new server, you farm as much as you can, and that could be either within a certain amount of time. Maybe you have 5 days, maybe you have 10 days that you can do, or maybe you have unlimited amount of time, which is similar to Infinity Kingdom. And then eventually you're basically just boosting your account up high enough to where you can then go to your final kingdom. And the idea is that you are able to start with more power and farther ahead when you jump to that second or your next kingdom, which would be your final or your home kingdom, and then you compare that with new players that are coming into the game and they're just joining that server for the first time. Because keep in mind, when a new server opens, the majority of the player base, I'd say probably 95 to 98%, if not more, of that server's player base is all new players. And that's because when you download the game and then you load it up for the first time, you're automatically put into the newest server that's currently up. So that's why the majority of players are usually always new players. The minority is typically always going to be veterans or people that have been playing IK for a while, and maybe they just want to make a new account in this new server, or if they're a part of a jumping group. Those are usually kind of the 3 situations that you would most likely come across for the types of players that you would see in new servers. Now, out of curiosity, and I'm just going to ask this question, you're more than welcome to answer in the voice channel chat via text. Does anyone want to take a guess at why? I guess at why jumpers were first created. Like if you just think about just going back a couple years, maybe 5 or 6 years, depending, right? Why do you think players, even in the beginning, would have even created jumpers, so to speak, when going into new kingdoms? Does anyone want to take a guess? And you're more than welcome to write that out in the voice channel chat. Again, if you're an existing member and you want to raise your hand, then you're more than welcome. Again, if you're a new member or just visiting, we're just not going to be taking any questions over voice, but you're more than welcome to write that out in the voice channel chat. If you're someone that has already roles or an existing member, you're more than welcome to answer. But again, let me see if anyone's... Okay, a few people. Let's see. So yeah, if anyone wants to take a guess, why do you think jumpers... Why do you think, if you just think about 5-6 years ago, or however long, when someone got the idea in their mind to make a jumper account, why do you think they would have made that account? And more so looking at the individual, right? Prior, and it could also be for a group, but for the most part, right? Why do you think somebody would even have wanted to make a jumper account in the first place when they first started out? Right, and there are a couple answers here. There's really one that I'm more so looking for, but there could be a couple answers. I see a few people are typing. I'm just going to wait to see. Okay, so Astromouse said, I think they use it for farming stuff, and they got bored of their first account, so they wanted to restart. That is true as well. That definitely is one reason why they would have. Babson said people are all about min-maxing their time. I mean, that's more or less true as well. Another example could be that you would have wanted the, for example, you would have wanted anyone really to more or less look at how you would do any form of, I guess as an example, right? If you're looking at not only doing the min-maxing, but if players start playing a game and then for whatever reason they then decide that they've learned enough in that game where they would want to try to restart and do some form of min-maxing and being able to basically take the most advantage of their account when they do start. So again, those are some of the reasons. The one that I'm really looking for is, and I know I did see a couple people that, let me see, yeah, so Astro Babson responded. Okay, so the answer I'm really looking for is more along, and again, those are good answers as well, and they're definitely accurate. For me, what I'm more so looking at is the idea of why a jumper would have, for example, started out in just initially. And one example of this would be to when you look at it from a group perspective, right? So as an individual, most of the time you're usually going to be creating a new jumper, again, for a few of those reasons. It's either going to be to try and min-max your account. It could also be because you're joining another jumping group, and again, you're just going to be restarting that way. It could also be because maybe in the min-maxing capacity you weren't able to farm as many initial resources outside of just figuring out good tech pathing for your academy, or maybe for your buildings, maybe when it comes to how to be more efficient with your immortals or your commanders or your characters as far as leveling them up. Again, there's a lot that really goes into kind of overall min-maxing. Though the answer I'm more so looking for is when it comes to server stability, and more so the hostile volatility of new servers. And usually, for the most part, there is a overwhelming trend that happens in Kingdom Builders. And that trend is that when a new server comes out, the servers themselves are innately and really by default hostile in nature. And part of it is, and I don't mean hostile in a bad way, it's really just more in a way of understanding how the player psychology trends when players play games like this, right? Kingdom builders or war games or war strategy games, right? Part of what we do in this game, as much as you do in other kingdom builders, is you do PvP, right? You attack players, and that's part of the game. Now, in Infinity Kingdom, this is actually a little bit more incentivized. Again, if you look at something like the nobility system in game, where it gives you added bonuses to go out and attack players, where you'll get honor, and because you're accumulating more honor, you'll get passive buffs because you're doing PvP. So there's a couple big things here. The first is that there's leaderboards, right? Let's really just strip it down from its most basic form. Because there's leaderboards, when it comes, let's just look at alliance leaderboards, right? So you have the alliance leaderboards, which again is one form of incentivization, because you have leaders, you will have some leaders or R6s that will tell their players, hey, we need to power up. We need to keep getting stronger so we can eventually go and take this city, or we need to be strong enough in case a battle or a fight breaks out, right? So that's one area of incentivization when it comes to just general PvP that's factored in. The second is that you have individual leaderboards. You actually have two. You have Lord Power, then you have Troop Power. This is yet another form of incentivization for going into doing PvP. And then you have the third honor leaderboard, which is more or less the most important, right, which is Lord Honor, right? So you can see how much PvP players do in any given server at any time. Now, the fourth big part here is that because you have an honor leaderboard and you have your nobility system that gives you passive buffs for doing more PvP, right? These are all compounding, incentivized areas in the game that all have the same common denominator, which is just conducting or doing PvP. Now, and then if you think about it, actually the fifth one would probably be the faction system, where you have blue, red, and green, right? And then you have this kind of faction power points and leaderboards, right? Where it's, some people will look at that as saying, well, we need to try and outbeat or outwin or have more city structures or more faction points than the other colors. So there's about those five areas plus or minus, where all of them have some amount of factoring that goes into the general PvP. Because of this, if you then, and I would say probably the sixth area now that I can think of is, if you look at content creators, for example, right, whether that's someone like myself or other content creators that you have out there as well, which again, shout out to all the people that do that. Again, you can check out any of those in the IK Video Creators channel that's on the Discord. But if you generally look at, even if it's content creators in other Kingdom Builder games, most of the content they are putting out, right, and this is going to blow your mind, most of the content that they put out is all more or less PvP focused, for the most part. And what this means is that, and let me give you an example of this. If you were to go and load up any popular Kingdom Building content creator, with the exception of maybe myself, and trust me, I say that with the most amount of humbleness, and I'm going to explain why here in a second. If you look at the majority of content creators and Kingdom Builders in general, what you will notice is that most of them are producing content, as far as the majority of their content, if not all of it, is based on a couple things. It's based on things like, what kind of pairings or compositions would you run with your characters, right? Again, which focuses on, for the most part, PvP. It does also do PvE, but again, it still factors into PvP. They'll do things like how to power up your marches the fastest, how to grow your city the fastest, right? Tips and best practices for just leveling your account in general, right? All of these things are to put you in the best position possible to be as strong as possible for when things like battles occur in your server or your kingdom, when KVK or SVS comes out, which is the server versus server, kingdom versus kingdom, where you have multiple servers and kingdoms battling it out, whether they teleport to another server or they teleport to you, or you all get ported onto a new map and then you're doing like a battle royale style, right? Again, this is by far the most important and arguably the best event in these types of games. And then you have AVA, which is your alliance versus alliance, kind of one-on-one battles. And these are things that, when you look at the majority of content, the way that it is skewed goes in the direction of factoring right back into PvP. Right now, yes, there is some PvE content that creators will put out, but for the most part, a lot of the tips and advice that you'll be seeing from content creators, and I even have some of this on my channel as well, is more focused on PvP. Now, why I say I'm the exception to this, at least from my experience thus far and from what I've seen, I want to preface with that, is if you go on my channel, for example, you will see that I talk about a lot of other things, right? I love talking about server management, alliance management. I like talking about player psychology. Why do things trend in a certain way? And I like explaining that to players so they have a better understanding, right, of why do certain events have certain implications and after effects on the entire server based on how this event is set up, based on player actions that players choose to take in certain events on your server or on your kingdom wide. So those are different areas I like to talk about on my channel, right, when it comes to managing a kingdom, managing a server, right? And some of those will be loosely tied into PvP, but for the most part, it's really more about managerial and structuring and your processes and how you do your server, your kingdom-wide logistics. How do you have a communication line set up, right? These are really important things I also like to talk about. And again, in addition to some of the other things that you'll see from the majority of content creators. But my point, circling it all back around, is that these 6 areas, again, plus or minus, all factor into a player's perception on PvP, right? So when you come into the game, if you go and look at a content creator, they're talking about how to improve your overall account in a multitude of different ways. That is all going to be factored, or at least a part of it, if not largely, into PvP. When you join the game, you will see other players probably getting attacked at any point in time. There's events that come up in your server like Kill Event, which is Contentional Lords, and then you have King of the Hill, which Stage 5 or Day 5, and Day 6 is a Kill Event portion as well. So there's a lot of things that you're going to see, whether you look it up externally outside of the game, or you see it happening internally inside of the game, whether it's before one of these milestone Kill Event type events come up, or when they do. And all of those things factor into how, when a new player is coming in, the game incentivizes them, whether that's passively, directly, or indirectly, that, that you should probably do some PvP, or think about doing PvP, or just do it, right? Again, depending on the timeline for when an event is happening in your server. So Now let me bring it back a little bit more on why I explained and took that amount of time to talk about that. It is because when a new server opens up and new players are joining, sorry, let me tie this into a second point. The second point is that when you're going in without a jumping group, let's just say you're a new player joining a server, there's no structure, there's no organization in your server, you're just playing the game. Heck, you have no idea, more or less, that there could even be structure in a server or a kingdom. Why? Because you're a new player. You don't know anything about a kingdom builder. So there's all these things that new players have no idea about as far as how a server could really be professionally structured and organized. And so they're just looking at what they see visually for the first time and then what they're watching online. This is the number one reason why servers, all new servers, regardless of the kingdom builder you play, are all hostile by default, right, at the start. And that's because, again, there's no regulations, right, there's no rules in place. If you're a whale, right, this is why you hear a lot of stories about, for example, whales or rogue players just going around and attacking everyone. And that's probably because there's no one there in the server that is going to either put up a fight, and again, I'm talking about if you're just going in as an individual or if you're just going in as an individual alliance, right? So keep in mind, if there's no form of groups going in or even full alliance jumpers going into a new server, it's all new players, which means that you're going to have individual different leaders that you have no idea how any of these leaders think about the game, how they want to set up a server or a kingdom, what are their goals, do they all want to be number one, are they just going to fight it out, do they just want to watch the server burn, right? There's so many factors that go into when a new server starts, and again, I'm going to tie all this back into why this is a good kind of historical point to talk about why jumpers got started in the first place, is to avoid server volatility. It's to avoid the constant roulette game of not knowing what is going to happen when you get into a new server, right? Because a lot of players who like doing the min-maxing, like we had a couple people point out before in the voice channel chat, is that you can min-max your account the best you can, and you can enjoy the time you're putting into the account. But once you start learning more about the game, again, for these kingdom builders and specifically Infinity Kingdom, you will start noticing a lot of these trends. You'll start paying closer attention. Maybe you'll join the server or kingdom Discord if they even have one. Maybe you'll pay a little more attention to world chat sometimes. Maybe you may even decide, hey, let me message one of the leaders from some of the top alliances to see, hey, what are we doing for this event? Why are we constantly getting attacked? Or maybe when someone becomes king or queen of your server, maybe that's when you'll decide, hey, let me ask this person, because they're the king or queen. They have to have a lot of information, right? They have to know a lot of what's going on in the server. They should be able to answer my question as a player in this server. And that's kind of a topic for another time on like the pressures of being king or queen, and it's not really suited for everyone. But I'll touch on that probably later. The main part here is that because you have no idea how a server or a kingdom is going to play out for a new one, it is important that you increase your chances to have a either stable server or a server that can actually grow and keep activity in. Usually what happens, and again, after I say this, it will retie everything again, is that when servers, there's certain milestones in servers that I like to refer to as breaking points. Now, some of those breaking points are going to be when cities are initially starting to be captured. We're talking level 1, level 2 cities. If you're an alliance that is not able to cap a level 1 or 2 city early on, it will make it more difficult for you to most likely capture a higher level city, because most of the alliances that were able to capture level 1 and 2s will probably be the same pool of alliances that will have a shot at then capturing a level 3. So it's almost like the first gate. It's like a soft gate that usually happens at the beginning. And then that's when you'll see a little bit of player drop off, maybe some alliance drop off, right? This is very general, and it happens in every kingdom builder, right? Depending on what type of structures or objectives you have in your game. So in Infinity Kingdom, after that happens, right, then you'll have the Supreme Alliance event, you'll have the City Siege event. These are big payout reward events in the beginning of a new server. This is the second breaking point, or the second drop-off point, I should say. Depending on how this is managed, you're probably going to see more drop-off of activity in your server. And then when Contention of Lords comes up, which is going to be the first kill event, server-wide kill event for your kingdom, or I guess it could be, depending on how you manage it, this is going to be the third breaking point, or the third player drop-off, where you're probably going to lose more activity depending on how it's managed or mismanaged. Then the fourth one is going to be King of the Hill, and arguably COR, which is Contention of Relics. So there's really 5 kind of starting breaking points that every server has on big milestones on when you're going to see activity drop off. The objective in any server and kingdom is to keep as much activity and player retention as humanly possible, right? Because keep in mind, when right now the intervals between new servers opening up is 2 days. It used to be 3 days, and back when I was playing betas, even with my buddy Shadow, who's in here, and I'm sure others, if you were, intervals were pretty long. It was sometimes a couple weeks to maybe a month and a half before a new server came out. But now, things are obviously going really well for IK, thankfully, and now we have about 2 days, with the exception of the last server opening, or the one before, which was about a day in between, and that was cool to see, because that was the first day interval we had seen. So you have on average, right, 40 to 50,000 players at minimum that are joining and getting put into a new server. We don't really know what the threshold is, but we average it somewhere around 50,000. That's based on when a new server opens. If you just look around the map, you'll see everyone starts out with the Lord player name by default, right, if you start out in that server. And then they're assigned a random number, but those numbers reset as each new server opens. So you look around the map, you'll probably see someone with Lord 50,137, right, as an example. So that's where we kind of pulled those average numbers from, is because I looked across multiple servers and I saw that there was this consistent trend. So that's why we average that it's somewhere around 50,000, give or take, if not at minimum, for how many players are getting put into a new server. What this means is that when a new server opens up, you are getting all of that incoming traffic. You're getting every single player that downloads Infinity Kingdom is going to join your server, along with any players that are either jumping, restarting, or jumping as an alliance, or even as a group, depending on the size. Those are the types of players you're going to get. But keep in mind, the veteran players, the people who are either creating accounts or doing jumpers, whether it's an individual or a group, those are the minority. You are the smallest percentage of people that are going into that server. The majority is always going to be new players that are downloading the game or playing for the first time. So again, tying this all back around, is that the important part of realizing why jumpers are created or were even started to be created in the first place. It is to give you a higher chance of providing initial structure and stability in a new server instead of just leaving it up to chance on how it's going to play out, right? So that is more or less the history on why jumpers were created in the first place and the factors going into how jumpers, at least in a simplistic broad view, and I'll probably dive into that a little further later, on why and how they can benefit new servers by providing some of that initial structure. Now keep in mind that can really only be done if you're going to be jumping with a large enough group. If you're just going to go in and jump with an alliance, it's going to be much more difficult, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Anyways, with that part being out of the way, and kind of just talking about the history, how some of the new servers trend, and tying all of those things in along with those factors, does anyone have a question on that? On anything I just talked about, whether it's the history, and again, if you want to raise your hand, you're more than welcome to. Keep in mind, if you're a new player or a visitor of the stage channel or the server, you're more than welcome to ask your question in the voice channel chat. We're only going to be calling on existing members for anyone that does want to ask something over voice. But again, you're more than welcome to ask your question in the voice channel chat. And I'm just going to take a few minutes here to see if anyone does have one. Let me come back. Sir Tom. Okay, cool. Let me call on you. Looks like you had your hand raised. I don't know how long Sir Tom had his hand raised, though. That's also another part. Alright, let me just refresh that. If Sir Tom comes back, then I'm more than welcome to. I'll wait a second just in the voice channel chat to see if there's any questions. And welcome if you're just joining the show. Let me see, Nadim said, we did a huge jump in Iraq, and the goal was to build the kingdom without letting any chance to civil war, or to avoid waste of our forces on each other. Just organized everything and built ourselves strongly to KBK, and it was a great kingdom. Yeah, I think that is, more or less the ideal way and the hope, for the most part, that you would usually want to go about organizing a jumper. Keep in mind, I know for your situation that was more of a group, which really is what we kind of talked about initially, being a little bit more focused there. Okay, well, if there are no other... Oh, hang on, someone else has a hand raised. Let's see here. Visitor... Okay, no, all right. No problem. So let me do this then. Let's go ahead, and if there are any questions that pop up, please feel free to post those in the voice channel chat. Again, if you are a new member or just a visitor, keep in mind we're just not taking any questions over voice, just out of respect, but you're more than welcome to ask your question in the voice channel chat. Okay, so we just got done talking about the history of jumpers, more or less why they started in the first place, and we took time to explain why it is important because of what happens in new servers for why jumpers were even created in the beginning. Now let's talk about, let me see what I have here for my nice thing here. Okay, so now let's talk about the different types of jumpers and their different impacts on a new server. So, even though we briefly touched on this, I'm going to dive into it a little bit more. So, let's start off first with, let's say you're just an individual going in. Let's say you're one player, you're making a jumper account, And again, and then after this, we'll also talk about, either after this or towards the end, we're also going to be talking about how you would make a jumper in Infinity Kingdom, and then what also would be the benefits and kind of how you can go about doing that with the processes. So we'll start off with a player, and then we'll do an alliance, and then we'll do a group. So there'll be 3 different sections we'll talk about for the different impacts that whether you're a single player making a jumper, if you're a full alliance making jumpers, or if you're a group of alliances making jumpers to prepare for a new kingdom. So as an individual, your more or less focus would be, again, for the most part, everyone's going to be min-maxing no matter what, but the amount of impact you can have as an individual, right, by preparing a jumper for however long you want, could be something where you are able to act in some capacity. Sorry, I always have to have my midday yawns. Where you can act in some capacity as a potential early deterrent against any rogue players that go into a server. You can go in as an individual player where you have you're at the power level, or your troop power, I should say, your primary troop power is at the power level of a day 7 player, even though you're able to go into that server, let's say by day 2.5 to day 3.5, give or take, because you're stronger than most likely the average player, if not the above average player, right? It would also give you the benefit of probably giving you an easier time getting into, like, let's say a higher ranked alliance within the faction that you join. In addition to maybe helping out if there's any kind of rogue players in the server, if they're just kind of going around and attacking, you might be able to have a little bit more of ability of supporting that earlier. Again, usually, though, and this is really coming from more of the free-to-play perspective, right? So a lot of what you're going to hear me talk about is just from default a free-to-play perspective, and I may add on something when it comes to spending, but if you're just a free-to-play, which is going to be the majority of players just by far, those are some of the ways that, as an individual, if you made a single jump or a single jumper account just for yourself, that's some of the areas when you're joining a new server on how you can have an impact and some of the direct benefits that you can also get from when you join. Now let's talk about alliances. So let's say you are, and I'm just going to use the example of 50, and that's just because when you start a new alliance in Infinity Kingdom, your initial cap is at 50. You can raise that pretty quick, but it does start at 50. Second midday yawn. Gotta love those. Okay. So now, at this point, let's say you have a full 50 players that are going to be able to fill up a starting alliance at the beginning. So you're going to have your 50 players preparing their jumpers, and then once that day 2.5 to 3.5 starting window opens, you all jump, and then you would most likely remove the players or the inactives that are in your alliance, or you would just make a new alliance at that point, and then you have everyone join. Now, how can you as an alliance impact the server? So actually in a few ways. More than if you're just as an individual. And this is because if you've been preparing accounts for a while, there's a good chance that when you join, you are probably going to have, you're probably either going to be, depending on how long, you can be anywhere from, a top 5 alliance in power to arguably the number 1 alliance in power when you join. Now, keep in mind there's a lot of factors, and this is probably going to be an expanded topic for another week, but there's a lot of factors that go in when you can come in with that immediate amount of strength, right? It means that you'll probably be able to cap a level 1 or level 2 city if you really needed to right away. You arguably could maybe even go for a level 3, just depending on how many people you had above the average garrison power. So being able to capture cities, not going to be a difficult part. The challenge, though, is that when you come in right later, if cities are already captured, then you might have to recapture someone else's city, right? So there's some pros and cons that goes in there. You'll be able to impact the as a potential, and let me just give an example here, as a potential number 1 alliance, there's certain additional areas of accountability and responsibility that you may have indirectly and more so passively, because you are the number one alliance in a server. And this really is just game-wide. This almost goes for anything. When you're a number one alliance, usually the leader of that alliance is messaged quite often. And it could be for a multitude of things. It could be for players requesting you to come and help them capture a city. Maybe they're getting attacked and they're reaching out to you to see if you can send support or help. Maybe players are reaching out because they want to leave their alliance to join yours. Maybe other alliances want to ally with you, so that way they don't get attacked because they can kind of leverage and lean on you in that situation. And that can either be in an actual mutual-like relationship, or in more of a kind of parent-child relationship where you're acting more as a guard, if you will, to other people who may think twice about attacking other alliances that, so to speak, are under your quote-unquote protection. So there's a couple areas that go in there, but for the most part, as a potential top alliance when you join, or again, arguably a number one alliance, right, from you joining with a group of 50, you will also probably be somewhat attractive, right, for recruiters, for players that would be interested in joining, and it will help you either keep and maintain a top alliance position on the boards, or even a arguably number one position on the boards. That'll also factor into you being able to be a part of any potential kingdom-wide discussions. So let's say a council is formed. Let's just say you get into a server and you have, someone sets up a kingdom or a server-wide Discord, or you have other groups of alliance leaders that are coming, that are now reaching out to other top leads to maybe talk about some kind of policies or game-wide server-wide rules for how you guys want to implement things. There's a good chance that you would probably be included in those conversations. You may even be able to steer or lead some of those conversations, right, if you are a number one alliance, or at least have equal say, if not more, right, in what your input is or feedback going into a specific decision, depending on your viewpoints as an individual. So these are some of the areas that we'll go into for how you, as an alliance full of jumpers, can factor and benefit factor going into a server. Now let's talk about the third and final one, and then of course we'll open up the voice channel chat for any questions. And if you have any questions now, you're more than welcome to ask. Again, we'll call on hands as well for any existing members with roles here in a second. So the last one here now is, let's say you're going into a server with a group of alliances, and that can be anywhere from, let's just say, 2 alliances upwards of, let's just say 6, because for the most part, that's pretty much the average. It's somewhere between 2 and 6 that you're more or less going to find in most jumping groups or projects. So let's say you go in with 2 to 6. Then let's say you could do it a couple different ways. You can either just front load everyone into one faction, or you spread it out into 2 factions or 3 factions, right? So you got 3 choices you can really do. Now, as a group of alliances, your input and your presence going into a new server, right, coming up to that day 3, is going to be looked at a lot differently. Does anyone have some guesses on, let's say you're a group coming in of 3 or 4 alliances to a new server, and let's say, for the most part, because this is pretty common, is that let's say you guys come under a family name, where you'll have a portion of your alliance name will kind of all be the same, just signifying that you're unified, right? It only signifies that you are together and you are a somewhat organized group within your family set. Does anyone have a guess on what the impact of that is going into a server, right? What are some of the big benefits or just big impacts in general that you think a group going into a new server on day 3 would have, right? What are some advantages or some and again, please feel free, you could type this out in the voice channel chat for anyone that has a guess on this, or even if you want to raise your hand to try and answer this question as well. And there's not really a wrong answer, but I am curious. What do you think some reasons are? If you're going into a new server with a big group, or a biggish group, what do you think some advantages are that you would have in that new server? What do you think some areas are that you can influence, benefits you would have, how others may perceive or look at you? I'm curious on any guesses there. No? Nobody wants to take a stab in voice channel chat? Oh, okay, there we go. Nadim, I might have to start calling you the class rep. Which you can thankfully take that title away from my buddy Ghost. Wink out to you, Ghost. I don't think he's here, though. Okay, so Nadim's typing right now. Again, I know we have some new people that are just joining. The question we just asked, which you're more than welcome to type it out in voice channel chat, or if you're an existing member with roles, you can raise your hand. What do you think are some factors or areas that you are able to influence if you join a new server as a bigger or biggish group? What do you think some direct benefits are of you going in as a bigger group? Astromount, love the answer. Totally was expecting some text, but I really got caught by surprise there. Maybe benefits. Okay, so Nadim says most of players want organized kingdom and alliances, so they would prefer to join good organized ones. Okay. No, that is definitely an answer. Okay, Skittles says power in numbers. Okay, that is another good answer as well. So yes, again, more or less along the same lines. The adding additional context to those two responses. When you join a server with a larger group, you do have a power in numbers advantage, and that's mainly because you have a more average player or per player organized base given how many alliances, right? The example is that let's say you go into a server with 4 alliances, and let's say you can fill all 4 of those alliances up with 50 players. Well, that's 200 players at the start of the server that are allied together and potentially anywhere from very organized to slightly organized. And they will most likely, for a good part, probably fight with each other. They will, they will go full, they'll support each other. They'll contribute with each other. They might help with cities. If they get attacked, they'll support their other alliances or players, right? These are things that you will see players factor into when it comes to having a larger group. In addition to that, if you usually have a little bit of a larger group, you're also able to be a deterrent potentially against any possible rogue players, or if there's rogue alliances, or even a group of players, or maybe even just one player, right? You're able to potentially address that earlier rather than later, or at least have an eye on it. So it can also help you provide structure. For example, something that Nadim said. You're able to factor in how a server might potentially be ran or managed. You might be able to start or even lead discussion on a lot of those potential policies, because usually if you are the majority group in a new server, and this is a very common thing as well, if you look at things, for example, such as when a new server starts, like we talked about before, there's a lot of server volatility. And that's just because there's, for the most part, in almost every new server, there is no organized body. And it's usually even more difficult if, let's say you join, and I'll give you a direct example. When we did our single alliance jumper, we had about 60 players. We had joined server 6, and this is pretty common across pretty much every kingdom builder. You're probably going to see this happen a lot, where you are you're a single alliance, and maybe you're someone who cares enough to reach out to other leads to try and form an organized body of however many alliances within the top of the leaderboards. And because of that, you're then also trying to communicate with them, talk about policies or goals or how to manage certain events. You will most likely come across a few roadblocks, just depending on how many. One of those roadblocks could be other leaders just see things differently than you do. Other leaders want to just do things differently than you do. Maybe some will agree with you and points that you're bringing up, or maybe you agree with points that someone else is bringing up. Usually, though, and this is one of the funny things I always talk about, is right, everybody wants to be alpha. Does anyone have a guess on what I mean by that? When I say that, I shouldn't say everyone. What I should say is there's always going to be someone or a group of people that want to be alpha. What do I mean by that when in relation to trying to organize a server, right? So if you're coming in, right, as a single player or a single alliance, how can that affect what you are able to do, how much work you're able to get done in a server or a kingdom when you have one person or a few people that always want to be alpha? What do I mean by that? Okay, Skittles, you might be my news class rep. Yeah, so I think so. Kaya said people want to be top dog, which is more or less the simplified version. Skittles expanded on this a little bit and says people want the fame and recognition of top dog, but not the responsibility. I don't know if I could have worded that probably any better than how that is. And I'll tie this back into something else that we talked about before, which is when you become king or queen of a server. That's probably an entirely different topic on its own. But how it affects jumpers is that when you are going in as an alliance, and we did this in server 6, which was one of the first 8 beta servers, we went in as an alliance of 60 players. The first thing we did is we reached out to all the leads within the top 20. And we asked them, hey, do you guys have Discord? If you do, we would love to get you into a group chat. And then eventually, if we got more than 10 people, we would just create kind of a temp council server, a temporary council Discord server for the kingdom. And so we ended up getting, I want to say we ended up getting about 9 alliances in the top 20. There was, I think, 5 or 6 within the top 10 that we got. And we basically just made like a temp Discord group chat that could hold up to 10 people. I think we had 9 or 10 people that were actually in there. And the idea was just to sit down and talk about stuff. It was to sit down and talk about, what was everyone's viewpoint on the server, right? How did we want to handle things like city distribution, right? Who was going to have first shot at getting capitals? Who was, how would we do placings for Supreme Alliance or City Siege event? How would we manage kill events for Contentional Lords and then eventually King of the Hill now that that's out? How would we do COR? Would we do some kind of an equal faction rotation? Is it just going to be free-for-all? Whoever is the strongest or invests the most, right, is going to win it, right? I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to how you want to organize or manage a server that, for the most part, the majority of the player base has no idea that these conversations and topics even happen, or even would happen. And again, for your 99% that I refer to it as, right, for new players, they just don't know, right? They don't know what they don't know. And that's why it's always good to take time to educate and inform. Now, when it comes to, for example, you going into that server as an alliance, those are some of the challenges that you'll face. Because in server 6, right, at one point, our alliance was the number 1 alliance for a while. And then eventually, we had got passed by another alliance. Now, this alliance just wanted to watch the world burn. They didn't care. They just wanted to go and do PvP. That is more or less an immediate roadblock to you then having any hope that this server could be one that you would want to play in, right? Now, for people that have more knowledge than others when it comes to how servers could potentially play out and what you would ideally like to see happen in servers, right, depending on your group, if you're managing one or if you've even done any of those types of things before as a server or project manager, or even if you've been a part of jump groups as a lead, right, where you're probably a little more privy to some of this information, or even maybe sometimes an officer as well if you're an R5. Right, you will notice certain red flags and trends that happen in servers, especially and more so if you played in multiple servers as well, whether it's in Infinity Kingdom or across other games, or other kingdom builders, I should say. Right, there are certain milestones, there's certain types of flags that you will see come up that give you caution. And so we saw this happen in Server 6, and again, the majority of us decided, well, again, it's probably going to take a while for things to potentially change or work out differently. And this also factors back into why you would want to go in as a group, right? The benefit of joining a jumper project that has multiple alliances is that, like others have said, you are able to have a bigger impact on kingdom-wide diplomacy, on kingdom-wide discussions, on implementing certain goals or even rules, right? If you have a good structure or policy set up for when certain events come, for how you're going to manage the server, right? If that's even your intention, or if you just want to be a big portion. Keep in mind, not all big jump groups or bigger jumper groups are all going to have the same ideals. Some may just want to come in and be a contributing factor into the server, or maybe they don't want to manage, or they don't want to help support or assist in running things within the server, right, to better it. They might just want to come in as a group of players and just be the top alliances, and that's it. It can kind of be anything in between. Now, because you have this amazing potential benefit that you can, or I should say somewhat of advantage or just additional access because you've come in as a group of alliances, it's even that much more important that you do not mismanage yourself. But again, those are just some of the points. I don't want to dive too much into some of the more intricacies and kind of deeper, more advanced portions of it. But for the most part, that covers what the benefits are, the pros and cons are of joining a new server as a single player jumping, as an alliance full of 50 players jumping, or as multiple alliances in a group or a family setting jumping into a new server. Anyways, before we get to the next topic on jumping, which again, we still are going to be talking about how to actually do a jumper and what are some of the things you would focus on. We'll probably give some examples of some servers you could join as well and give you a little more information there. Does anyone have any questions specifically on anything I just talked about? Again, if you're an individual, alliance worth, or group of jumpers and the benefits or pros and cons they have going into a new server when Chronicle 3 finishes and when it opens up, does anyone have a question there? You're more than welcome to type that out in the voice channel chat. If you want to raise your hand and you are an existing member, again, not a new member or visitor, you're more than welcome to it. We can call on you. Yeah. I see POPO's in here. Shout out to PP. I'll probably just say POPO from now on. That didn't come across well. But welcome. Can't stand to not what's up. Oh, Alicia, hey. A few friendly faces. All right, let's see here what we have on the voice channel chat for any questions that players are asking. Okay, so we have let me see, Agatha Damon. For Agatha Damon, I'm going to go with that. He asks, when you jump as an alliance, does the alliance name and level also travel with you, or do you have to remake the new alliance? So, short answer is yes. You have to remake the alliance. Alliances don't travel. Player stats will travel with you. As an example, if you've accumulated honor in your starting server that you're in with your jumper, that will carry over with you along with some of the other stats as well. But you would have to make a new alliance or join an existing alliance in the new server that you jump to. Alright, I'll give it another minute or two, just in case there's any other additional questions on anything related to that topic, and then we will move on to our next. And let me see what I have here on mine. So, awesome. We talked about what is a jumper, why is it important, benefits, how and why did it start. Okay. And then we talked about stability, kind of the differences in sizes for how those can provide structure. Okay, so I'll probably expand a little bit on that. So that'll probably be the next topic, and then we'll actually talk about how to build a jumper account, what to do, and some best practices. So again, I'll give it another minute or so in case there's any additional questions, Windows 10 pod, hey, that anyone might have in regards to the last topic. So about 60 seconds, and then we will move on to the next. Yeah, man, my daughter is watching the new Croods movie right now. It just came out on Hulu. I'm so excited. I can't wait to go watch it again. Okay. As I'm just filling myself with some agua. Alrighty, let us move on then, and we will go ahead and talk about the second to last topic, I guess. Or maybe third to last topic. We'll see how much time we have and what we decide to kind of expand on. We're about 55 minutes in right now. So, the next topic is going to be us discussing I'm gonna try and briefly talk about this before we get into the jumper one. Is right. What are some of the expanded true benefits that you'll have again as a jumper group, and really the main points here. The main point, again, and I'll give examples for the two projects I've ran so far. One in S8 that we built S8 out of. And that was a project that I started and ran there, and then also for S36. So in S8, we started with, oh gosh, I think we started with 8 alliances. We had 8 leads. We started out with 8 alliances. In S36, I think we started out with 7 or 8 alliances as well. So, which again means we had 7 or 8 leads. Keep in mind, this is a very small amount. For those of you who've played Rock, if you're familiar, I mean, I've done 4 big jumper projects in Rock. My first 2 projects, we recruited 800 players in 2 weeks, back when jumping was really popular. And that was all from a grassroots effort. You know, that was no external promotion or kind of content creation promotion, because I just didn't even do content for Rock when I played. And we ended up having, I think on my first project, we had 450 to 500 players that converted with us over to the Final Kingdom, and then we had about that same for the Second Kingdom upon the second jump to the third and final. The projects for, again, but in 2 of those projects, I had 12 alliances and 15 alliances, along with 12 to 15 leads. So they were actually double the size for ones I've done in IK, which is pretty much my standard, more or less. I'm always a big fan of having more is better than having less, just because it's easier to condense and merge than it is to expand and create more alliances out of thin air, especially for development-wise and tech development. Again, I'll probably expand on that later. So, let me fast forward here now. The main reason why you would even start a project is to avoid the possibility of you having either to restart or make a new project, or even just restart as an individual, right? It could be restart as an individual group, or even just join another server, or even worse, or I guess otherwise as well, migrate out. So by going in, right, like we've briefly talked about, with a big enough group, or just a big group in general, it gives you certain, and I'm going to approach this from a different perspective than what I've talked about before. Let's say you want to go in and you want to make a project to specifically help and manage the server, right? To support the server, be a steward to the players, right? There's a lot that goes into that. And especially if you're someone who's leading that project, if you've never managed a server before, if you've never managed a kingdom before, I will tell you, it is very different than you going in as an alliance leader, right? And managing just your alliance. The mindset that you approach with is different. The amount of people that you are responsible for on their gaming and player experiences is different, which is why it's not really meant for everyone. This is something that Skittles touched on earlier, where she said people want the fame and recognition of being top dog, but not the responsibility. This is the same exact thing. I'm sure many of you, if you've played other Kingdom Builders, you know that you probably have seen some interesting king or queens in your time that most likely either fell under the pressure of what that position and role actually took in order to be it and be in that position, whether it be the amount of messages that you get, whether it be the constant challenges of questions that you're getting, or challenges on doing a policy a certain way, or anything like that. And that can come from players, that could come from officers, that could come from other alliance leaders, whether they're within your family or not. And it's all about how are you addressing that. That's why I try to explain to people, right? If you want to, if your idea is, well, I just want to be king or queen of a server, and you have no idea what actually goes into that position, keep in mind it is almost like a second job to an extent. You are tech support and your customer service all in one. And that is really how you have to approach it. Which is why I tell people, like, if you're someone who's managed people in real life in your current job, or you've done something like worked in retail, where it's very customer service oriented, right? You're talking to a lot of people, answering questions. You probably will have an easier time, whether it even be as an alliance lead, and then more so as a king or queen of a server. So that's why I also make that hint, is because when you come in as a group of alliances, and let's say for the most part, most groups usually have a family name where they will go under, right? They'll go under something. As an example, ours was Syndicate that we had in S8 and S36. We'll probably have a new family name for our new project that we're running right now. And so because of that, you will, right, your group could be looked at differently, right? And it doesn't mean that your group's going to be looked at poorly. It just means that your group is going to be looked at, okay, well, they're a group of alliances, they're a family worth of alliances, right? What's going to happen? Are they just going to take over the server? Are they just here to support the server? Keep in mind, as a new player, you have no idea what, when you start seeing groups of alliances, your immediate thought is, well, maybe they're allying up. But what are they going to do? You don't know what they're going to do. So that's why I talk about there's a lot of responsibility that comes on jumper groups, way more than they know. And a lot of that responsibility comes from things that are not directly in their control, right? You can't control how another person is going to perceive or look at your group coming into a server. So let me ask this. Let's say you're a group of alliances that joins the server. What is one thing you can do as a group to control or manage the perspective of players, of new players in that server? Just any guesses. Again, if you want to type that out in voice channel chat, if you want to raise your hand to try and answer that question. Again, if you are a existing member. For any visitors or new members, we're just not taking any voice questions from you, with respect, but you're more than welcome to ask or answer that question in the voice channel chat. So again, what is something you can do as a group of alliances in your jumper project or jumper group that can help lend perspective or manage expectations for new players in a server? Take all their players, okay? All right. I don't know if serious or not, Bambaro, but all right, okay. That's I mean, maybe. I think that'd be a little difficult. You'd probably have to make like 100 alliances potentially. But okay. Does anyone have another guess by chance? And I'll give it a minute or two in case anyone wants to try to answer. I see Skittles typing. Scrutiny of the ones who run things has to be the toughest, in my opinion. Working with people is easy, but the negative judgments is the hard part. Okay, no, that is definitely true. So the answer I was more or less looking for was going to be educating, right? Informing players. And what I mean by that is you can do this a few ways. The information game is arguably probably the most crucial game that needs to be handled with a lot of TLC. What do I mean by that? Well, if, like we've talked about before, we've already explained and set the foundation that 99 or 95 to 98%, I'll just say 99% out of default, of new players, of players that are joining a new server, are new players to the game, right? They have no idea what's going on. At least the majority of them don't. Now that other kind of 1 to 5% could be anywhere between players that are trying out that game, but they've played other kingdom builders and they're coming over to Infinity Kingdom because it's a kingdom builder and they're similar in that genre. So maybe they have a little bit of experience. It could also be veteran players that have been playing IK for a little while. Maybe players that played in one server but now they want to min-max and restart. It could be a jumper player, it could be a jumper alliance, or even a jumper group. Now, when you are going in, though, to that new server with your group, the important part is that you take the time, initially, to message all the players. Right? You would message not all players, but you would message all the alliance leads. So you would message all the alliance leaders and then maybe any officers as well that you can. So you would inform them ahead of time, right, what your group's goals are, what their objectives are, right, depending on what you want to do. Right? Now keep in mind, some groups may just want to watch the world burn, and they don't care to message you, and they don't care to engage with you, and they're just going to attack you nonstop. I feel sorry for those servers. Again, keep in mind, any server can play out any way it wants, right? That's kind of the nature of this game and Infinity Kingdom, and just the nature of the genre, more importantly, of kingdom builders. But again, that's just how that kind of ties back in, right? If you're going in with a group, there's a lot more responsibility and accountability that you have on yourself because of the way that players and or other alliances will look at you when all they see is the unknown, if you don't take time to do diplomacy and to reach out. Okay, so that kind of talks about my third point. The next one we'll talk about is going to be, and before we do, again, I'll open the floor up for any questions, but next we're going to talk about how to actually build the jumper and what are some good practices that you can do with it. So I'll give it a minute or two here just in case anyone has any questions on jumping with a group, some of what those expectations and pros and cons can be. If you have a question around that, you're more than welcome to ask in the voice channel chat, or if you'd like, you're more than welcome to raise your hand as well if you are an existing member in the server. Let's see, voting. Ooh, some more votes. I really love the new suggestion section that they added to the Discord server, where people can submit their suggestions and then people can vote on them. Oh, such a great addition. Someone do my homework. Alright, let me come back to voice channel chat real quick. Let's see here. Captain Haddock says, is this going to be any different than what you've already shown in your video? So, some of them will probably be different. There's probably going to be a couple points, which is, I would say for the most part, what I talked about in my jumper video is, the meat of it all, right? So I would say probably 90% of what I talked about in the video is still going to be consistent for what you would do as a jumper. I'm probably going to make a new jumping video just because there are a few other points that I may touch on here as well that now I would like to try and include some of those. But for the most part, even if you just went off that video, it's not going to, impact you any more or less. It's really just some more of the smaller, minute areas. So now let me talk about kind of, how you would go about prepping a jumper. So alrighty, third or fourth yawn out of the way. So excited. Okay. So what you're going to do as prepping a jumper, and again, if you go on YouTube, there's a few of us content creators that have put out jumping videos on how to go about it. And just for argument's sake, let me see here, let's search. Where is it? Jumping, jump guide. I don't know if this is, let's see here. Oh, oopsies, jumper. That's how I spelt it. I have to remember how I did that. Okay. So there are, I'll just, again for sake, I'll put a video here in the voice channel chat, and then I think there is, let me see, jumper. I think there should be one more. Okay, so here's one. I'm gonna give that one. I think Westy did one. I am always happy to give shout outs to other creators that also do them. I just don't know if there's any others from people that have covered jumper videos. Give me a moment. I'm just taking a look. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. I don't see any other jumper guides. Let me see here. Jumper guide. Okay, yeah, no, I think that's it for the jumper guides. Okay, so let's come back now. Now with this, if so again, let me start. So those are two videos there. I think myself and Westy are the only ones who put out any kind of jumper guides or videos on how to go about doing a jumper account. Now, usually what you're doing is you're making a brand new account, and you are starting out in preferably a server that has all the chronicles completed. The reason why is because once you get to a certain point, again, you have to stay at Castle 8 or below, but once you get to a certain point, I want to say it's around 7, Castle 7 or so, you will get access to the Chronicles, which you can then just collect a lot of free rewards. You'll be able to get the majority of them with the exception of a few. And that allows for you to then use those resources. A lot of those are green gems and others that you can then use to, when you land in the Final Kingdom, right, it gives you extra resources, so you'll have those on hand if you need to level up or have the required amount of resources to level up buildings, do research tech, and other things as well. With the green gems, it'll allow for you to either immediately invest all of those into VIP if that's your route, or if you want to use those to purchase Philosopher Stones so that you can end up doing more 9 times pulls in the Hall of Immortals. Those are kind of the two ways that you're really going to take advantage of green gems for the most part, in my opinion. Again, you could also use some green gems to purchase epic shards in the market, but I really think doing Philo Stones is probably the better, more ROI route to go. As far as for one of those two. Now, after you start your jumper account again, you'll stay at 8 or below, and then from there, you will really just be doing a lot of your dailies. For the most part, once you get all your buildings to 8, you're not going to have any buildings. You're going to eventually be able to max out your academy tech because you're only going to be able to level up everything to level 8, which I think is anywhere around 30 to 40 techs, give or take. And then from there, some of the areas that you're going to do on the daily basis, right, you're going to still be trying to get your daily 100 chest. You may have to purchase boosts or boost at a time. One way you can mitigate that is by leveling, by doing the min-maxing and just leveling one RSS building at a time. That way you can still level up a building 1 time a day, along with factoring how long you're going to be prepping your jumper for. You can do the same thing with research. That'll at least help you get some extra points on that daily 100 chest. I think that was something I don't know if we touched on in the jumper video. Along with, the other big thing is redeem codes. So redeem codes are great because you can actually double up on redeem codes. I think this is something I might have forgot to mention in my jumper guide as well. But you can go on and input redeem codes on your jumper, and then you can double up on those when you get to the new kingdom or the final kingdom, and you can re-enter those again on your account. So that's another great way to take advantage, similar to how you can kind of get that initial boost from Chronicles, except you can double up on these. But you can't double up on Chronicles. From there, Right, you're doing a lot of your daily grinding, right? You're using all your action points to do gnomes, making sure you have 3 treasure chests at more or less all times from doing gnome bosses. You're trying to advance in Well of Time, and then you're doing raids on the highest level Well of Times you can, right? You're investing on your primary troop march, right, to try and get as high of a troop power as you can on your primary march as possible prior to you going to the Final Kingdom. You're also going to be able to start searching for ruins. One of the awesome benefits now for jumpers is that because they added the special ruins, or the level 4 ruins as some of us call them, right after you search or scout all of the level 1, 2, and 3 ruins, you'll then get access to the level 4 or the special ruins. So you have to 100% level 1, level 2, and level 3 before those open. Once they do, you could search around the map the same way you've done for the other ones, or just go off the new ruins hint finding system and find them that way. But this is an amazing way to boost your account by trying to finish and doing 100% ruins completion as early as you can. Because once you do, then you get access to those special tiles, which is just more and better rewards that you're going to be able to get for your account to use those resources to just continuously boost, right? You'll keep leveling up your dragon. You'll probably be using your gold mostly for that, along with any gold for boosting any of your immortal boost levels, without trying to sound redundant, but your boost levels from once you get enough materials from Well of Time. Again, Mysterium, you're not going to have access to until level 15. Or excuse me, Castle 15, and then you will, or God, maybe it's Lord level 15. I totally forget since it's been a while since I've hit Mysterium. But again, you'll have access to that later. But outside of that, that's it. I mean, you're really just grinding gnomes. You're doing gnome bosses. You're doing Well of Time, and then you're searching for ruins. Those are going to be the big things that you're really going to be doing. Now, you can still gather resources, and every time you gather resources, right, even though you're going to hit a low resource capacity or resource threshold, gathering resources are still going to go towards your growth achievements, which by hitting more of those will increase your Lord level that much faster, which means you're going to eventually get access to probably a 3rd march, right? There's a good chance that you could probably hit Lord level 20 with a jumper if you just prep it long enough, which means you'll have access to a 3rd march pretty early on. Outside of that, I want to say that that's pretty much it as far as kind of how you're going about picking a server to join. The recommended portion here is that you want to try and at least hit troop power 19k or 20k, and that's because if you factor out the average troop power for the top 100 players at the middle of the pack, once day 3 hits, it's around that troop power. So what that means is that if you're around 19 to 20k troop power as a free-to-play, you will be within the top 100 troop power players, and around the middle of that, somewhere between maybe 50 and 75, you'll be around, which again means you'll be some of the stronger players in the server at the time you jump. Instead of if you didn't wait to level your account up there, and let's say you came in with 14 or 15k troop power, right, then you probably would be somewhere around maybe 200 to 300. So that's another big benefit for why you want to wait long enough to get that troop power level. Now, the more time you prep the account, keep in mind as well, one of the other biggest things about this is that there's no time limit. I mean, you could prep a jumper for a year before you jump, and you could be at 50, 60, 80k, however much a year would be, right? But you could be really strong as troop power. I mean, I've seen some people that have prepped jumper accounts for 2 to 3 months, even though the game hasn't even been out 5 months yet. Right, I've seen some people that have prepped jumper accounts for 2 or 3 months and, came in with, a pretty strong troop power march. Now, keep in mind, this is really just for the free-to-play base. If you're someone who spends money, you're going to be able to prep your jumper a lot more, right? You'll be able to, buy more packs, you'll be able to spend more, so you can increase your troop power faster than, again, someone who's a free-to-play. So those are just some areas that you can factor in, right? That's the base level idea that you would do with your jumper account, how you're going to prep it, what you're going to focus on doing your dailies, and other things. And of course, I provided 2 resources in the voice channel chat. So if you're interested in watching either of those, or even both, just to get some different perspectives, those will help when it comes to how you can maximize your jumper project, or excuse me, your jumper account. Alrighty, sorry about that. I am back. Okay, so yeah, those are pretty much all the areas that you're going to focus on, pretty much for the most part, with a new account. Does anyone have any questions in regards to that? I have to still catch up on voice channel chat, but if anyone does have a question in regards to what to do with your jumper account, please feel free to ask. Yeah, I also probably wouldn't recommend doing any of the harbor sailing as well. Again, unless you're going into a, yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I still wouldn't. The only way you do that is if you join a new server, which you could, but I just don't know if I'd recommend. Sorry, let me see if there's any hand raises here. I wasn't even looking. I'm just coming back now. Okay, let me take a look at voice channel chat then, and see here. Yes. And then as a lovely shameless plug, if anyone is actually interested in jumping, we are actually, again, you can go, actually, if you're interested in jumping, you can go to the server or jumper recruitment channel, and you can look for jumper group ads that are there. I will also give a shameless plug, which is that if anyone is interested in jumping, we just started our new jumper group or new jumper project that we're doing. So if anyone's interested in that, you're more than welcome to take a look. And again, you'll find I think there should be I don't even know what it is, either in my bio, or if you just go on the ads, you'll probably see one. Let me see. Nadim said there is idea we applied before and it was fantastic. A lot of players want to PvP. Just give them that in a smart way. The idea was to create a fake enemy-like clan against you in public, and you can fight them with fight them. So all who want to fight will join that fake alliance. Interesting. So you made a fake alliance? So you, just to confirm, so you made a fake alliance with in your server, and then you had everyone join that, so if players wanted to PvP in the server or the kingdom, they would just attack only that enemy alliance? Just curious. Oh, let's see here. AoE 3. Age of Empires, man, can't wait for AoE 4 to come out. Ah, the hype is real. So real. Nadim, you said like top 3 or top 4. All those want PvP will join. So, what do you mean top 3 or top 4? Do you mean you created an alliance and then you had players from other top alliances that joined that newly made alliance, and then that newly made alliance acted as an enemy or an enemy alliance or a rogue alliance in the server, so that way players that wanted more PvP could just go and attack them? I guess just so I can try and get a good understanding. Let me see, someone has a hand raised? Nope, new member. Let me see, I'm just waiting for Nadim to finish typing. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, let's see, you have top 1 and top 2 alliances, so it will be your leaders and officers, but fake enemy. Got you. So essentially, like I hinted at then, where you would have players from some of the top alliances that would just join, they would leave their alliance and they would join this fake alliance, or this fake enemy alliance that would act as an enemy in the server for players who wanted more PvP. Is that more or less correct? I guess well, let me, until you add on, let me just assume that is, or let me just go off of providing a I guess, an additional point of context. So, though I think the idea is good on paper, I don't. Let me backtrack. I don't know if I want to say good. Let me just say that is an idea on paper. Let me say that. So though I think that is an idea on paper, the some of the inherent challenges with that is if you have, like, let's say you did that scenario and you made an alliance that was just going to be like a fake PvP alliance. You still have to fill that alliance with players, which means that you have to take away players from somewhere to then fill that alliance with players. And if you have players that just want to go and do PvP, and keep in mind, right, that's a rickety boat to play with, because you don't know if the people that are going to join that alliance, that's their true nature, and they just want to do nothing but PvP, and again, potentially watch the world burn, which means you don't know if they're ever going to come back, or if they're just going to stay in that alliance and keep doing PvP, or maybe they'll keep doing a bunch of PvP and stay longer than anticipated, and then they'll try and rejoin, but who knows how much potential damage is already done, right, given what they were going out and doing. Now, if they were just focusing on attacking other people that wanted a PvP, and maybe you designated a zone or something like that, I could see something like that happening. That could be a little bit more structured in that regard. It's real, a lot of country doing that in war times. Got you. So I'm not sure if that would be something. Again, I feel like maybe you're giving me an example for a real life scenario compared to something that would be more in-game doable, so to speak. But yeah, if anything, I see where you're coming from in that. I do just think there are probably some inherent challenges with doing that in-game as far as creating a new alliance for those purposes, with some of the pros and cons that can come out of that, just depending on how it's managed. Let me come back here. Flash, just see if anyone had a question with their hand. Okay, doesn't look like it. Let me see. Again, welcome if you're new. If you're a visitor or a new member, you're more than welcome to ask your question in the voice channel chat. With respect, we're only taking voice questions from existing members that have roles. But if you stick around and you join next week, depending on what happens next week, then you're more than welcome to ask a question. Alrighty, so I think that covers that one. Let me see what we have last. So we talked about kind of the benefits of doing a jumper. We talked about how you can make a jumper, what areas you would focus on when you're making a jumper. We provided some resources that are in the voice channel chat for people that wanted to read those, along with where you can go and find more information on current jumping groups within the official IK Discord. That's again in the recruitment channels, and you can look for the channel called Server. I'll even just type it here for those that are curious, where you can eventually find those in there as well. All right. I think that more or less covers that portion. The next thing I'll do is, again, I'll just open the floor up now. So if anyone has any questions at all whatsoever about jumping, it can be anything. Whether you are interested in asking a question as a player, if you're interested in asking a question as a jumping alliance, a jumping group of alliances, or I guess a larger group that has multiple alliances within them. If you want to ask something about how to take advantage or maximize your jumper account in other ways, how jumpers can potentially affect how a new server can play out. Again, anything and everything. If you have a question related to that or just to the general topic that we are discussing, I'm just going to open up the floor completely now. And then I will give it a few minutes if anyone has a hand, or if you want to ask something in voice channel chat, you are more than welcome to. So, and I'll just give it a couple minutes to see what we might have come through. But I think at least for the base level of jumping information, I think we've done a good job kind of covering the topic for today on jumpers. we're almost at an hour and a half. That's actually pretty good. I thought we would be a little farther. All right. Okay, let's see. Okay, doesn't look like any other questions have come through in voice channel chat. Let me see if anyone has a question here on the hand raise. So let's see. Guys. Alright, let me come back. Alright. Okay, well, I'm going to give it maybe another minute or two. Like I said, I think we've done a really good job today of doing a nice overall coverage on, what is jumping, how to do it, and the areas that it impacts. Again, whether you're an individual alliance or a group of alliances that are interested in doing jumping, along with giving players resources or immediate resources on how you can get more information on making a jumper account and maximizing your jumper, along with where you can go to find more information about joining existing jumpers by showcasing some of the resources that you can find here on the official Infinity Kingdom Discord. So again, I'll give it a couple more minutes here. And again, anyone is more than welcome to ask a question about anything related to jumping. And again, as I said, that can be as an individual, alliance, or group. It can be how you're impacting a server or anything in between. And you're more than welcome to ask that via voice or utilizing the voice channel chat, which is just a couple channels above this current stage channel that we're in currently. Clown, hey. And again, if you are a new member or visitor on the Discord, we just ask that if you have a question, please feel free to ask that in the voice channel chat. We're only going to be taking questions from existing members that have roles with respect. All right. Well, okay. I think I'm probably going to call it then there. If nobody has any additional questions that they'd like to ask in regards to this week's session on jumping, I'll just end it off with, as I usually do, I thoroughly appreciate everyone who came to join and to check out. I think we peaked at somewhere around 45 people for this topical session, which in my opinion is still great numbers. Again, I'm sure as we kind of continue to do additional weekly topics that are going to be a little bit more specialized and focused, similar to how we did this week. Again, as we talked about, for if you're someone who's just joining or if you're just tuning in now, the first 4 weeks we did kind of a new player experience to Infinity Kingdom and just the Kingdom Builder genre in general, where we talked about, right, what is Infinity Kingdom, what are some of the what are some of the kind of good benefits or good features, I should say, that really separate Infinity Kingdom from others and why it's so enjoyable. We talked a little bit about that, and then some of the experiences you can have in Infinity Kingdom, along with week 1 going into the beginning stages of a new server if you're a new player joining, what you would experience kind of in your first month. Week 3 was months 2 and 3, or day 30 to day 90. And then week 4 was us discussing or talking about 90 plus days once you start kind of getting into the late game. And then this week we ended up doing a topic on specifically jumping and what that is. So if players are interested in doing that or trying to get more information and resources to make an account, we provided those along with a lot more. And then next week we'll probably do another topical discussion on something different. So again, keep a lookout for that in the announcements whenever that may come out, as we kind of look to put that into effect. But again, I appreciate anyone and everyone who comes out to listen. Regardless if it's morning, afternoon, or evening. I do hope everyone has a good day, afternoon, or evening in that regard. And again, I hope everyone enjoys, and at least if you're able to take away something from the sessions that we host. That's something that I'm always really happy about. I'm a big believer that taking time to educate and inform players, especially your player base, is vitally important. And that's just because most new players coming into Kingdom Builders, again, don't usually know anything about how to take advantage in certain areas, or how to min-max in certain areas, or why certain things happen the way they do in servers, whether it's something event related, or why are these two alliances going to war for whatever reason. And so I think being able to utilize something like this stage channel on the official Discord is a great way to get good quality information and resources out to players. And it also allows for us, I think, to do a lot of good real-time kind of live Q&A engagement with players as well, for anyone that asks questions kind of related to those topics. So anyways, with that being said, not to have my TLDR be too long here for my closing notes, again, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I hope you took something away, even if it was just one thing. That's really what I'm happy enough to hear and just to know. And I think with that being said, we are good. I have just stopped